Welcome back to Morning Joe. Last year, 80% of the venture capital in the United States went to just 3 states, and none of those states went for President Trump in the election. Joining us now, best-selling author of Hillbilly Elegy, J.D. Vance, and co-founder of AOL and founder of Revolution and the Rise of the Rest initiative, Steve Case. The initiative aims its focus on startups located outside of those 3 areas. And as Steve says, talent is evenly distributed, but opportunity is not. Gentlemen, good morning. Good to see you both.
Great to be with you.
So, Steve, let me ask you first why you decided to bring J.D. along for the ride.
Well, we launched this Rise of the Rest about 3 years ago. We've done bus tours now, 6,000 miles, 26 cities, trying to really understand what's happening and try to stimulate these startup communities. But we decided it was time to take it to the next level, really shine a spotlight on the great entrepreneurs building great companies in these cities, and push more venture capital, more institutional capital to the middle of the country. And J.D., because of the success of his book, which sold now nearly 1 million copies and really inspired a lot of people and opened people's eyes to a lot of things, plus his experience as a venture capitalist in Silicon Valley, really was the perfect combination. So it'd be great to work with him.
And why is it that so much of the money, 80% of it, flows to just such a concentrated area?
It's obviously a lot of great things happening in that area, and there's most of the venture capital's there, and it's easier to get in the car and drive to the company than get on a plane and fly to the company. But that's starting to change, and what we're trying to figure out ways to do with this Rise of the Rest initiative is accelerate that. And some of that is making sure the venture capitalists on the coast realize that great companies are being built in Chicago and St. Louis and all over the country, not just in San Francisco and New York.
So the 3 states of California, New York, and Massachusetts, where the venture capital money goes to. So my question is, how do you get people to stay home in places like Southern Ohio, Western Pennsylvania, Northern Kentucky? How do you get them to stay home?
Well, you don't necessarily need them to stay home if you mean they're small, hometowns. But a lot of these regional economies are really driven by what's happening in the exciting cities in some of these areas. So Columbus isn't just a great city for Columbus. It's also really important to the entire Central Ohio business ecosystem. And I think that's true of a lot of other mid-sized cities in these parts of the country. So I don't think of the question is so much how do we keep people home. It's how do we really take these other cities, these cities that don't get quite as much venture capital, and provide them the capital and some of the opportunities they need to really explode the growth, the potential that's already there, because they have world-class universities, they have a lot of talent, they have a lot of benefits. What they don't necessarily have is a lot of access to venture capital.
JD, the president is very focused on trying to revive employment in the manufacturing sector, trying to bring those kinds of jobs back. Do you see what you and Steve are trying to do as a replacement, in a sense, for post-manufacturing job growth? I mean, and what will your numbers be, do you think? I mean, how big an impact can you have?
Well, I think it would be great, obviously, to bring some manufacturing jobs back, but I don't think that you can base the entire future of American economic growth on jobs that frankly were there 30 or 40 years ago. So the question for me is, how do we prepare a lot of these regions for the jobs that are going to be there in the 21st century, the next 20 or 30 years? And that is fundamentally a question of high growth startups. That's where a lot of these new jobs come from. It's not from legacy industries, it's not from really small businesses, it's from really high growth startup businesses.
But are they high employment startups too?
Very often they are, right? Not all of them are employing a ton of people, but a lot of these businesses are employing. If you look at Facebook, if you look at Google, if you look at Twitter, there are a lot of really high quality jobs in those places. 2
examples. We at Revolution, we backed a company called Shinola in Detroit. It didn't exist 5 years ago, over 1,000 jobs now. Also a company in Chicago called Uptake, didn't exist 3 years ago, now nearly 1,000 jobs. So it happened, but we need to get more capital. The ideas are there, the talent is there, we just need to make sure the capital's there. And actually JD's an example of somebody who grew up in a small town in Ohio, felt the best opportunity was to move to Silicon Valley, now has moved home because he senses something is happening. We're seeing that around the country. The brain drain to the coast is slowing, and we're seeing the beginning of a boomerang of talent, and we hope we accelerate that. If there's more capital there, people will realize there's more opportunity there and start moving back. That will then create the jobs that will level the playing field across the country.
Shinola is a great company.
I'm wearing a Shinola right now, and I'm not even a paid spokesman.
Thank you for the business.
It's just a great watch, that's all. JD, let me ask you now, I guess 4.5, almost 5 months now after Election Day, the people you wrote about in Hillbilly Elegy, a book that broke through in an incredible way for people who wanted to learn more about what happened on Election Day. How are they feeling right now? People in your hometown, people in the state of Ohio. Let's take, for example, as they look at this health care bill, where a lot of people could lose their health care coverage if Medicaid is rolled back in a couple of years. How are people changing the way they feel about Trump, or are they still with him?
Yeah, so what I've said for the past 4 or 5 months is that people are going to give Trump a pretty long leash. They're going to give Republicans a long leash to actually see whether some of these negative trends start to get get better. The healthcare bill is the first piece of legislation that I think people are really starting to look at and say, I don't know if that's what we voted for. I'm not sure if that's what we bargained for. So I do think it poses a pretty significant risk for Republicans if they continue to go down the path with this particular bill the way that it's written. But look, if it ultimately passes, then I think that just means that you need more private sector investment and more private sector activity in these areas, which is hopefully something that we can bring with Rise of the Rest.
What does President Trump go back, if this, let's say it passes, I mean, it's a long shot, the vote's tomorrow, and even if it gets through, the Senate has said it won't, but let's say it does. What does Donald Trump say to the person who voted for him who's going to lose health care coverage under Medicaid?
I don't know what he's going to say, but he's going to have to say something because people will be very frustrated. And the big issue with this, in my view, is that the Medicaid expansion is in some ways the stopgap preventing the opioid crisis from becoming even bigger, even more of a significant issue. So if you take that away without a significant replacement, then you're going to have something really difficult to reckon with.
And I hope the focus shifts more towards the job side of things. Part of the reason he won was a lot of people did feel left behind by digitization and globalization. They didn't see the jobs in their communities, or they only saw the jobs on the coast. So focusing on things like the Rise of the Rest should be right down the strike zone in terms of the president's agenda. So hopefully once healthcare is dealt with and they start focusing on some other things, this issue of jobs, and the Kauffman Foundation does research on this. All the net job creation in the country comes from young startups, not from small business, not from big business, the Fortune 500 companies. It's these young, fast-growing startups. If you want to create jobs around the country, you've got to back the startups around the country, not just on the coast. And that's what Rise of the Rest is all about, and that's what our journey will be together.
Certainly what President Trump hopes, right?
That's right.
Let's
exactly.
move on from healthcare.
Well, good for you both for doing something about it. Thanks for this initiative. It sounds great. JD Vance, Steve Case.